What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com, your home for the 2020 World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined every Monday by Daniel Starkand, and we got a huge show for you today. Lots to talk about, but Daniel, no broom today. We got no broom for the first time in a few shows here.
Yeah, unfortunately, no broom this week. Not even a series win to celebrate this week. So yeah, it was a rough week for the boys in blue. I guess they were due. They had been playing, some great baseball before that. But yeah, I was honestly after Thursday's game, when we took care of the bullpen game, I was thinking like, hey, let's keep it rolling here. We got Buehler, we got Julio and Kershaw. Like, maybe I'll be bringing out the broom again, and then it all went downhill after that. 3 straight losses. Not great. Never fun losing to the Giants. But yeah, I mean, it was still a lot of baseball left to be played. No reason to get worried here. But yeah, we got a lot to talk about today. So excited to get into it.
Cool. Well, here's the plan for today. In just a moment, we're going to do a deep dive actually on a guy who I think has had a fascinating 2021, and that's Walker Buehler. This is a guy who, on the surface, his ERA looks really, really good. But when you look just beneath the surface, I think there's some cause for concern. So we'll get into that. We've got big deal, no deal on Mookie Betts' struggles, his injuries, updates on A.J. Pollock and Jimmy Nelson, plus a conversation about whether or not the Giants are for real. We'll do stock up and stock down. We'll do an exercise in which Daniel and I rank every bat and every arm as far as who we trust right now. We'll get to some preview stuff for the Cardinals and Braves. But let's start, Daniel, with kind of what we just saw. The Dodgers, as we said, lose 3 out of 4 to the Giants. The last 2, honestly, barely felt competitive. I know last night was a 1-run loss, but it was a comeback to lose by 1. They've lost 4 of 5. They're third place in the division. They're 2.5 games back of the Padres. Meanwhile, the Padres have won 16 of their last 20. The Giants have won 15 of their last 22. And so you said it, not cause for panic. It's still technically May today. Tomorrow the calendar turns to June. But at what point in the season do moments like the one that we're living in right now start to become concerning for you?
We're a long way off from that. Like, I feel like the Dodgers season, it's either everything's going great
Yeah.
or everything's going awful. Like, there's been no in between. So it's been kind of a weird year. But then, like, when you look up at the standings, like the Dodgers are right there. Like you mentioned, how great the Padres and Giants are playing. And it feels like the sky is falling in Dodgerland. Yet, we're 2 games out of first place, and one of the best records in all of baseball. So, I'm nowhere near hitting the panic button yet. I think we got to be in August, September, and we'll see where the standings are at then before we really get concerned. But obviously, it's never ideal when 2 teams in your division are playing as well as those other 2 teams are. Like.
Yeah.
You like to be able to lose a few here and there and not, slide in the standings. So yeah, it's definitely going to be a dogfight, more so than we thought it's looking like. But I'm still not, concerned by any means.
Yeah, and when we get a little bit later into sort of the state of the roster, I think you'll begin to understand maybe why we're not concerned. Let me see the Dodgers fully healthy, or at least close. I mean, maybe you never can expect full health, but when we look at the bullpen, you'll understand just sort of how dire the situation
Yeah.
is out there. They're missing a starting pitcher. Mookie Betts is struggling. Corey Seager's hurt. Cody Bellinger is just coming back from having missed a couple of months, and so I'm with you. The panic button is nowhere near. For the Padres to have won 16 of 20 and the Dodgers to be 2.5 games back of the division
Yeah.
tells you everything you need to know. That's not sustainable for the Padres, as good as they are. And the Dodgers, we know, are better than the way they're playing right now. So let a couple things fall into place and we'll see what happens. But definitely, as long as they can sort of keep within striking distance between now and the All-Star break, there's not going to be level of concern for me. One guy I do want to talk about, and I mentioned this at the top, is Walker Buehler. Now, Walker Buehler has a 2.66 ERA. He's 3-0 on the season. His whip is just .90. He's coming off a game in which he had 6 innings pitched, 3 hits, and just 1 earned. The concern is kind of the underlying metrics. So his last 3 starts, he has just 15 strikeouts in 20 innings, which isn't terrible for the average pitcher for Buehler. It's not great. He also has 8 walks. Here's what he said after Friday's game, quote, "Just not very good stuff tonight. Not very many good pitches. They found a way to kind of touch everything I was throwing. Kind of back to the drawing board. Kind of feel good that we got out of it, but I've got to be better. Our offense scraped a couple runs off their guy, and I've just got to be a little bit better." And to me, that kind of sums up what I want to get at here is they just found a way to touch everything that I was throwing. Let me give you some numbers about Buehler's career progression from a StatCast underlying metrics perspective, 2018 was his best year, 2.62 ERA. The expected ERA was right there. He was top 10% in just about every expected metric possible. The barrel percentage was just 4.3. So that means just 4.3% of the time was the hitter barreling him up. Exit velocity below 88 miles an hour on average. 2019, the strikeout rate goes up, the walk rate goes down, but the barrel rate also goes up, the exit velocity goes up. 2020, worst season of his career. Strikeout rate is down, walk rate is up, barrel rate is up, exit velocity is up, 3.44 ERA. 2021 so far, the strikeout rate is down to a career low of 25.3. The walk rate is a career best. That's sort of the one positive we've got here. The barrel rate is up to 11.1%. So that's double his 2019 rate, which was even higher than almost triple his 2018 rate. His expected ERA this season, based on that stuff, is almost 3.80. So we're not talking about a guy who's, quote, worse than we're used to. But when you look at the numbers, and I'm going to put up a graphic here in a moment, we're talking about a guy who's just pretty average. His barrel rate is in the 17th percentile. His whiff rate is in the 48th percentile. His exit velocity is in the 52nd percentile. Every expected number is around the 50th percentile. The strikeout rate is 59th percentile. The walk rate is the only one that's elite. So again, here's a sort of a graphic to show you what we're talking about. 2018 on top. Red is good. Blue is bad. White is average. You can see everything is red in 2018. 2021, though, lots of blue, lots of white. Aside from the velocity and the spin stuff, it's not great. Again, walk rate is the only kind of thing there. One other thing I took a look at was the whiff rate. I was curious if there was a change. Maybe there's a particular pitch that's not landing. It's hard to tell. Four-seamer was at 30.4% whiff rate in 2018. It's down to 24.5%. The curveball was thrown 16% of the time last year. Same rate this year. The whiff rate was 50% last year, 35% this year. Slider, he's throwing more this year. The whiff rate is up. The cutter is down a few percent. So, again, I don't know. I'm curious, Daniel. I'll throw all this at you. That's a lot, but I'll throw it at you. The performance has been okay. The ERA is good. The whip is good. None of the rest of this stuff underlying is great. So what do you make of Walker Buehler this year? And kind of how do you, especially as somebody who's pitched, how do you make sense of all this?
Yeah, I mean, you just laid out the numbers, and it's been a really weird year for Walker Buehler. Like you said, he's not giving up as many runs. Like he's got a 2.66 ERA, so you definitely got to look at that as a positive. He's gone at least 6 innings in every start. That's another positive. Like he's giving the Dodgers length. Um, but yeah, like you said, the numbers show it right there. He's not his usual dominant self, and I think that's the biggest difference. Is that's what we're used to. We're used to him going out there and dominating. And while he has been good this year, he hasn't been dominating. Like he hasn't been getting as many swing and misses. Guys have been squaring him up more. I think if you look at that graph there, I don't know if you want to put it back up, but to me the biggest difference was the barrel rate and the X slugging percentage. Like if you look, he was elite in both of those. He was 93rd percentile in slugging and 88th percentile in barrel. Now he's 30 and 17 respectively. Like if you look at the uh, whiff rate, it's honestly not that different. He was 55 percentile and he's down to 48. Like that's not a huge difference. But the thing is, when guys are hitting the ball, which is more frequently, they're squaring it up more, which can lead to some trouble. And I will say he's done a good job of getting out of jams, I guess, because he's not giving up the runs. So like guys are still hitting the ball hard off him. He's giving up more homers, but he's not giving up the runs. So I will give him credit there. Maybe you hope hopefully that stuff will turn around, and then you couple that with the run prevention, and then you have like a truly elite starter. But to this point, I would just say he's been good, not great. And he's a notorious slow starter. So maybe like as the second half of the season comes around, games are more important. That's when we've seen Walker Buehler be at his best. But I think as you read his comments, like he'll be the first one to tell you that he hasn't been great this year, despite having a 2.66 ERA, which is great. But yeah, I think it's just been a weird year. I think we probably have to see a bigger sample size before we really make too much of these numbers. But yeah, that what we're looking at tells you everything you need to know. Like there's no shape or form like outside of his spin rates that have been better than what he was in 2018 at his best.
Yeah, and the other big number that jumps out as I look at this now is fastball velocity. He was 88th percentile down to 71st percentile. Now you could say, hey, there's probably a lot more guys throwing hard, but that's one of the talking points this year is that the velocity is down a little bit. So if
Yeah,
your
it is.
velocity drops, just a mile and a half, a couple miles an hour, like that could be the difference between a guy getting a barrel on it and not being able to get a barrel on it,
Definitely.
especially because you look, his spin is way better on both of those pitches. So you would
Yeah.
imagine, and that's kind of where I struggle with the analytics, is tracking movement and that kind of thing. I'll leave that to sort of the statisticians and whatnot. But
Yeah.
I look at this, and there is area of concern. And, the one thing too about Buehler's a really, really good pitcher. I do think I don't know how to phrase this. It's almost like sometimes his playoff performance works against him, in the sense that, like, the understanding of who we have as Buehler as a big game playoff pitcher is like the best in baseball. I mean, I think you and I would both sit here and say, if we had one game and our life depended on it, Game 7, World Series, who would you want in all of baseball? Buehler would be really high up the list. The thing is when you look at his regular season numbers, he doesn't necessarily have the regular season numbers to justify being as high. So do you think there's a part of this where fans look at a guy like Buehler and they remember the World Series Walker Buehler, they remember big game Walker Buehler, and they say, that's who I expect every single time? And then when he gets to the regular season, he's a really, really good pitcher. I would say maybe just outside of the quote unquote elite starting pitching group. But do you think, I don't want to say it works against him, because it's obviously a positive thing, and he is a really good pitcher. This isn't knocking Buehler at all. But do you think there is a little bit of that, where maybe our expectations go up every postseason, and then the regular season comes around and we have to readjust expectations to say, hey, this is a 90th percentile type pitcher rather than a 99th percentile pitcher that we see in the postseason?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we see what he does on the biggest stage against the best teams, and that can't hurt. That definitely makes you wonder, like, why isn't he doing this, on a random Wednesday night
Right.
against like a mediocre Giants offense, like, so yeah, it definitely works against him a little. But the truth of the matter is that he's never been a truly elite regular season pitcher for whatever reason. I don't know what it is. Like, some guys just can't get up for the regular games the
Yep.
way they can for postseason games. I don't know, but he if you look at his postseason numbers, like, if you spread that out over a regular season, he'd be a top five, a consensus top five
Yeah.
pitcher in baseball, which I don't think he's at that level yet. So yeah, I definitely think it works against him. But honestly, if you're giving me the option to choose one or the other, I'll take the good regular season
Yep.
pitcher and then the elite postseason pitcher, as opposed to the inverse, which I guess you could say, Clayton Kershaw is kind of that. Like, he's always been elite in the regular season, and I'd
Yeah.
say his postseason struggles are a little overblown, but I think it's fair to say he's been good but not elite in the postseason. So I definitely would take the opposite if given the choice. But yeah, ideally you want to see Buehler go out and do what he does in the postseason every time out, and he hasn't, really been able to do that throughout his career.
It is interesting. The Kershaw comp is a perfect. They're the perfect inverse of each other. Because when you look at Buehler, I mean, this is a guy who had an ERA over 3.25 the last 2 seasons. Like, Clayton Kershaw went how many years in a row without ever having an ERA over 3? I mean, just to put in
Yeah,
perspective those two things. Whereas the exact is true. Like, Kershaw is very, very good in the postseason, but if you're expecting him to be one of the top 5 pitchers of all time come the postseason, there have been nights when he hasn't been that. And the inverse there is for Buehler. So I think that's a great comparison, because I think Dodger fans have kind of come to terms with who Clayton Kershaw is in the regular season and who he is in the
right.
regular season. And maybe that's like, okay, the way that you expect 90% of Kershaw to show up in the postseason, maybe let's start expecting 90% of Walker Buehler. Now we'll see. Again, this is more than just expectations. There's a lot of this. The barrel rate is genuinely concerning. To your point, it is still a small sample size, even though we are at basically the 2020 sample size. But
Yeah,
we'll see what happens. We'll see if the velocity ticks up as he gets built up. We'll see if the barrel rate comes down, and the strikeouts. I mean, barrel rate and strikeouts. I think those are the two key numbers to watch for Buehler, because, I mean, again, this is straight out of his mouth when he says they found a way to touch everything. That means he's not missing bats. He's not striking people out. And so if he can figure out a way to do that, it will lead to, right? Because if you're not striking someone out, it's because they're either, the range of outcomes is tipping the ball to barreling the ball, right? But if you can shift
right.
that in the direction to whiff to tipping the ball, that's where you want to live. Buehler has not been living there. So we'll see. Again, I want to be crystal clear here. 2.66 ERA,
Yeah,
0.90 whip is unbelievable. And the question that I have is, how sustainable is that? Is it, the expected ERA for Buehler
exactly.
is way up closer to 4 than it is to 3. And so we'll see what happens there. Something to
Yeah,
watch.
Yeah, just to tack on to that, all those stats you put up, all those StatCat stats, those are more like predictive for the future.
Yeah.
Like there's no denying that he's been good at preventing runs this year. Like you said, the 2.66 ERA. That's if you told me before the year, we'll be sitting here wondering why Walker Buehler is struggling at the end of May when he's got a 2.66
Yeah.
ERA. I would have said you're crazy. But yeah, these stats are used to predict the future. So even though Buehler has a 2.66 ERA, those stats are saying, he probably should have been worse. So
Yeah.
so yeah, we're not sitting here saying he's been bad by any means, but we're just trying to think of ways he could be better moving forward.
Yeah,
That's all.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, another guy in the same category. We'll shift to big deal, no deal, and I think the number one here is something that a lot of Dodger fans are worried about, and that's Mookie Betts. Here's a quote from Dave Roberts the other day. He's very frustrated. A guy like Mookie, who's one of the leaders on this ball club, he feels like he's letting the team down. Truth of the matter is he wants to be out there, and he just can't physically today. The other days, it was my decision not to play him. If I look back at other days he hasn't played, that's my decision, not Mookie's. So he's frustrated as far as kind of the nagging stuff. It's not something that's going to linger the rest of the year. This instance kind of just popped up late Saturday night, so that will pass. He's referring, I believe, to the allergies that kept Mookie Betts out of Sunday's game after the back tightness kept him out of Saturday's game. He missed a couple games the weekend before. So Mookie Betts struggling this year. He's hitting 240. He's missed on some fastballs in the zone. He's popping the ball up. He's not hitting the ball hard. It's been a disappointment for Mookie, on top of the fact that you've got missing a day here with a back injury, missing a day here with a shoulder injury, whatever it might be, just nagging type stuff. So big deal or no deal, the Mookie Betts situation in Dodgerland right now.
Yeah, it's hard to say because we don't truly know what's going on. Like, I think if he was 100% healthy and struggling like this, then it's a big deal. But I think everyone's kind of under the assumption that he's like dealing with something. What you
Yeah.
mentioned, the minor injuries. Feels like every other week he's getting hit by a pitch, or like he's dealing with something minor, and maybe those are adding up, and his body's just sore, or maybe he has an actual injury that they're not telling us about. He's a very prideful guy. He prides himself on playing, as much as possible. So he wants to be in there every day, regardless of how he feels. But I think it's pretty clear that something's wrong. Like he's not 100% of Mookie Betts, and that's probably the biggest reason for the struggles. With that said, though, he'll have a hot streak at some point, and then probably at the end of the season we'll be looking back at the numbers and they'll be looking okay. But yeah, it's definitely a little cause for concern. He hasn't looked like normal Mookie, and you just hope he'll snap out of it at some point here because this team needs Mookie. We saw last year the offense went with him. So he's the guy you need at the top of the lineup, setting the table for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, Dave Roberts has said he doesn't expect this to be an IL stint. Part of me wondered, do they just put him on the IL for 10 days, let him take a break, let him sort of recalibrate his mind, get his back rested, whatever needs to rest. It was funny because I believe it was Saturday night. Dave Roberts said, I don't even want him to pick up a bat. And then Dave Roberts puts him in as a pinch hitter late in the game. So it's kind of like, well, hopefully he took batting practice if you're going to throw him in there in a pinch hitting role here. And then Sunday allergies, again, people are like, is this real? I mean, I don't know why the Dodgers would not lie about something like allergies. Like if
Yeah.
they clearly had no issue telling you that his back had stiffened up the day before, I can't imagine why they would have issues repeating that type of thing again. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think it's a big deal in the sense that because Corey Seager is out, because Cody Bellinger has been out and has not back to himself, this is the stretch of baseball where having Mookie Betts, one of the best players in baseball, to kind of carry the load, has been a problem. It would be nice, I should say. And so not having essentially your three best hitters right now, where Seager is out, Bellinger is not quite back, and Mookie Betts just isn't himself, it's honestly pretty surprising the Dodgers have been as successful as they have been. I have to give them credit on that front. But I definitely think it'll be something to keep an eye on. Whether it's how many days off he gets, whether he can start to figure it out, because Robert's approach has been, hey, we're just going to keep throwing him out there and just let him scrape together some at bats, scrape together some contact, and hope he figures it out. We saw that with a guy like Gavin Lux, although maybe injuries played less of a role in Lux. He just kept getting at bats, seems to have turned it around a little bit. Even Max Muncy had a real bad stretch, and now, we'll talk about him in a little bit, but the last 3 weeks he's been on an absolute tear. So hopefully Mookie can get it going. Again, I think if you look at all of the injuries the Dodgers have dealt with and the guys who have struggled, and to think they're the third best record in the National League and 2.5 games out of the division, you have to feel really good. The flip side is that's under the assumption that the future is going to be better than the past. And with a guy like Mookie, you sort of bank on it, but at the same time, we haven't seen anything quite yet to make you believe it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just hope, like, if he's not healthy, you mentioned, potentially putting him on the IL. I feel like a lot of fans have brought that up. Like, if he's dealing with
Yeah.
something, I'd rather him just sit out for 10 days or 2 weeks or whatever and get right and then come back his normal self, as opposed to trying to play through this and playing or looking like a shell of himself at, 60% or whatever. So yeah, I mean, we're not sitting here. We don't know we don't know what he's dealing with, if it's anything, but we're just saying, if he is, then we'd rather him sit out, get right, and come back strong than continue to be, not Mookie
Yeah.
Betts.
Yeah. Well, along those lines, the next piece in Big Deal, No Deal that I think could be related, AJ Pollock and Jimmy Nelson, both doing rehab stints right now, both apparently due back this upcoming weekend, it sounds like. So I guess I'll say Big Deal, No Deal there. And then I've got a Mookie Betts angle question for you here. So AJ Pollock, Jimmy Nelson due back this weekend. Maybe I'll rephrase and redo the game. How big of a deal is it to be getting AJ Pollock and Jimmy Nelson back?
Yeah, it's a really big deal because you saw, just even though Bellinger and McKinstry didn't really do anything over the weekend, like, you saw who they were replacing.
Yeah.
It's like minor league type guys that haven't really been able to contribute all that much, and the same is the case here. Like, you're going to be taking Jimmy Nelson, who before going down was arguably like the Dodgers' best reliever. Like, he had struck out 17 in his final 9 1/3. Like, he was dominating, and then you're taking out probably the last guy down, like an Alex Vesia or Mitch White or something, which are guys who have struggled. So that's a huge difference. And then with AJ Pollock, he's a guy, he was swinging the bat pretty well before he got hurt. So it'd be good getting his bat back in the lineup. And it's the same thing. You're replacing the last position player on the roster, which we'll get into that stuff. We'll be ranking guys coming up, so we'll see who that is. But yeah, anytime you could take actual major league proven major league players and replace,
Yeah.
they're replacing, replacement level type guys, it's a big deal.
Well, and I wonder, coming off the Mookie conversation, I wonder if he has a few days here to figure it out. And when AJ Pollock comes back, if Mookie is still sort of struggling and not feeling 100% right, I wonder if that's the moment where you say, hey, we have AJ Pollock coming back. Let's sit Mookie for 10 days and just get him some rest, because you have AJ Pollock who can take over that spot in the outfield, sort of shift some guys around. But, if Pujols is playing well, then you don't need to feel the need to take him out of the lineup. Everybody else is still there. You can put Pollock in the outfield with Bellinger, Chris Taylor, presumably, and then you've still got McKinstry kind of floating around to give people a day off. So, yeah, I think the Nelson deal is a bigger one to me just because of how bad the bullpen is. You're replacing your worst reliever with one of your five best relievers. But I do think the AJ Pollock piece is crucial, especially if the Mookie Betts piece doesn't sort of resolve itself. So something to watch there. Again, the expectation, the hope, I think, is that they'll be there for the series in Atlanta. They have an off day on Thursday after a 3-game set at home against the Cardinals. So my guess is maybe those guys are able to join the team Thursday or Friday and be ready for that Friday game against Atlanta. Next on Big Deal, No Deal, Max Muncy, 100th career home run yesterday. Big deal or no deal for Max Muncy to get to 100 home runs?
This is a huge deal because this is a guy who was out of baseball pretty
Yeah.
much. He spent some time with the Oakland A's, going back and forth between AAA and the big leagues, winds up being released. It was some time before he got a call from the Dodgers, and he honestly, I'm pretty sure I saw in like an interview with him a while ago, he actually contemplated like moving on from baseball completely. And here he is. It was a quick turnaround. That was only like 3 or 4 years ago. Here he is now. He's an all-star. He's looking like an MVP candidate this year, and he's just been on fire lately. So yeah, 100 career home runs. That's a huge accomplishment. Like, there's not many guys get to say they hit 100 home runs in the big leagues. So yeah, props to him. Max Muncy's been by far the Dodgers' best player this year. Who knows where they would be without him?
Yeah.
And let's just hope he can keep it up. Let's hope he gets 100 more in the next couple years.
It is funny that 100 number for different people seems, certain different milestones. Like, there's certain people where it's like you're a 12-year vet and you get to 100 career home runs. It's like, okay, who
Yeah,
cares?
it's different.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
But for a guy like Muncy, I mean, you look at his career numbers. This is a guy who in his first 2 seasons in the majors had 5 home runs. That's over 215 at bats. That was ages 24 and 25. The whole 26-year-old season, he's in AAA. So he's got 5 home runs as a 26-year-old playing in AAA. starting to wonder, I imagine, what happens. Well, then he comes back, 35 home runs in 2018, 35 home runs in 2019, 12 home runs last year, 13 already this year. So you could tell even in the post-game press conference that this was a big deal to him, that it meant something for a guy that's been told, basically up until the age of 27 that he wasn't good enough, that he wasn't going to make it, that he couldn't figure it out. He kind of hinted at, like, you start to doubt yourself. You start to wonder if these people are right, even if for the longest time you believed you could do it. So shout out to him. I mean, again, to think of 95 home runs in basically a 3-season span, which is, over the last 3 years, that's where he's at. And not even 3 full seasons. I'm combining 2020 and 2021, and you're still about 2/3 of a season there. So for him to be averaging, 35 home runs a year for 3 years is impressive, especially for a guy late in his career. So I say late in his career. I mean, he's not super old, but for a guy that wasn't the top prospect that came up at age 20.
Late bloomer.
The late bloomer. There you go. There you go. So, yeah, I could tell he was excited about it. He was able to get the baseball. Here's my question for you, Daniel. I'll throw you a random curveball question. So the guy who got the home run, they were able to present it to Max Muncy. All the guy asked for was a Max Muncy autograph. Now, here's my question to you. If you catch a meaningful baseball for a Dodger, obviously you and I, we're happy to give this baseball back to the Dodger. What would you ask for? I mean, I'm just saying I'd be asking for more than just a Max Muncy autograph.
This is something I've thought about before. Unfortunately, I've never caught a home run ball, and definitely not one of that magnitude, but I've definitely thought about what I'd ask for. And I would want 2 things. I would want a signed bat. I think as far as signed things go, for a hitter at least, I think I'd put bat above anything else. Like a signed ball doesn't do a whole lot for me, but give me a signed bat that I could, fool around with, swing a little bit just for fun. And then the second thing I would want is I would want dugout club tickets for a game and like BP access, because I think that would be really fun. So those are the 2 things that I want. I think it would be like, I feel like they would have no problem doing that. Like I don't want to ask for something too outrageous. So I think a signed bat and some dugout club tickets, that would be perfect for me.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on the bat. A bat is a unique thing, right? Lots of people have baseballs. Lots of people have signed baseballs. A signed bat is a little bigger deal. I think I would want a team signed bat. I don't know what the likelihood here is, but I'm like, can we get a bat? Yeah, can we just get the whole team? I mean, these things exist. There are team signed memorabilia, so I'm like, that's what I want. Can you get me a bat signed by the whole team? And just shoot for the stars and see what happens. Maybe they're like, hey, we can't do that, but we get you a Max Muncy signed bat. And I'm not going to be the guy that's haggling necessarily. But yeah, I'm with you. The other thing I was thinking is, I mean, I would love to just meet the guy. Be like, yeah, I'd be happy to. Is there any way I could be there and give it to him, or meet get to meet some of the guys? That type of thing I think would be cool. But yeah, I'm with you. Definitely, I agree with you on the bat. But I'm shooting for the stars. And so there you go. If anybody catches a meaningful home run, again, we're not talking about threatening to not give it back. We're just saying, take advantage of the moment, see what you can get. And throw in the comments below if you've got a better idea than that. Then go for it. I'm with you on Dugout Club too. I've never been to Dugout Club. Seems like it'd be cool. Definitely out of my price range too. So if they could hook it up,
same.
hook it up there. That's what we got. Okay, last one. Big deal, no deal. This is San Francisco Giants. I kind of hinted at this. They take 3 out of 4 of the Dodgers. They've won 15 of their last 22. They're second place in the division. We've kind of hinted at this in different ways, and I think my perspective has gone up and down and whatnot. Here's my question, and this doesn't necessarily fall into the big deal or no deal category perfectly. Are you buying the Giants as legit contenders? Like, at this point in the season, we say, hey, it's so early, we're not panicking on the Dodgers. On the flip side, it is still just as early for the Giants, and yet they seem to be doing something that, I don't know. Do you think it's sustainable?
Yeah, I definitely think it's sustainable just because of how many bad teams you play throughout the course of a regular season. Like the Giants this season, they're going to play the Diamondbacks 19 times and the Rockies 19 times, plus all the other bad teams in baseball. And they've shown this season, like, they could easily beat up on the bad teams, that's what good teams do. Like, that's not a fault of theirs by any means. But if you beat up on the bad teams, you already got, like, you're already halfway or more than halfway there to being in the postseason. So I definitely think they're for real in the sense that I think they'll be in the mix for a wild card race. I think once we get to August, September, as far as the division race goes, I think they'll probably fall back a little bit. They haven't really hit their low stretch, which I think every team does, like, throughout the course of a 162 game season.
Yeah.
So I think they'll definitely have a stretch where they struggle a little. But I think they're legit for a wild card spot. And if that's the case, like, if they're throwing Kevin Gossman out there in a 1-game wild card, situation, I think that'll be a tough team to beat. So I think they'll be in the mix. I don't think I'm not exactly saying, they're gonna win the division by any means or anything like that. But I think they're for real. I think we're at the point where we could say it's been 2 months here. They haven't faded at all. They just took 3 out of 4 from the Dodgers. So I definitely think they'll be in the mix all year.
Yeah, it is funny because you look at their numbers, the bullpen, they're like they've sort of been a tick below the Dodgers in just about every category. Starting pitching has been one of their strengths. I think I look at their starting pitching and look, I know we have a lot of people that love Alex Wood. I'm not sure how sustainable that's been. I know he's been pretty good when he's been healthy, but I'm not convinced that he can continue doing forever what he is doing. Desclafini, another guy that I think has benefited from not playing anybody. But I'll have to admit, I mean, I tweeted this morning, Bob Nightingale pointed out that the Gossman contract at the beginning of the year, the qualifying offer, got a lot of flack. I was number one on the list of people thinking that was an absolutely ridiculous and comical signing, and I was wrong. I mean, Farhan saw something in him that maybe other teams in baseball were ready to pounce on, and the guy's been really, really good this year. He did it against the Dodgers, so it's hard to really argue the competition piece when he is doing it against a team like the Dodgers. And so, yeah, I'm not necessarily, I still don't think they're on the level of the Dodgers and the Padres. Like, I still think at the end of the year, my guess is that the Dodgers and Padres will be close within 3 or 4 games, and the Giants will probably be 3 or 4 or 5 games behind them. But I definitely think you look at it. I think somebody was tweeting today about like what are the odds all 3 teams could make the playoffs, and it's fairly reasonable that all 3, because there are so many other teams that they play that even if they beat up on each other a little bit, as long as the 3 of them take care of business against the worst teams in the league. I mean, they have the 3 best records in the National League right now. So that's what's going to happen as it stands today. And I don't even think it's like if you look at the Dodgers, who are 3rd in the division, versus the next best wild card team, I mean, they probably have a 3 or 4 game split over them. So, yeah, I'm starting to believe that the Giants are more for real. Now, we'll see. They've been pretty fortunate on the health front, it looks like, as far as their better players. I know Brandon Belt is on the IL right now, but the other piece of this is what Buster Posey's doing sustainable? Is what Brandon Crawford's doing sustainable? Is what Belt was doing before he got hurt sustainable? Those are the types of questions. It feels like they're kind of checking every box right now. Can you do that for 162 games? Remains to be seen. Okay, moving on to stock up and stock down. Kind of a funky week for the Dodgers. Again, we've had some positive stock up, stock down segments the last couple weeks. This one, we could go a bunch of different directions here. So I'll start with you, Daniel. Stock up, stock down. Who do you have in the first as your first entrance into this category?
My first entrance is a stock up, and I'm going with none other than the machine, Albert Pujols. He's been awesome. Everything you could ask for. I mean, over the weekend, if you just look what he did against the Giants, he hit 2 homers. He hit an RBI double. He hit a 3rd ball that should have been a walk-off home run, but unfortunately it didn't go 3 inches further, and it found a glove. But he's been swinging the bat really well. He's slugging over 500 since joining the Dodgers. He's got an OPS slightly over 800, which I think that just blew anyone's expectations completely out of the water. He's swinging a hot bat right now, so those numbers, who knows, they could even go up over the next week. So it's good to see Albert. He's fitting in great in the clubhouse. It's nothing but smiles. He's it looks like he's mentoring some of the young guys. A lot of guys have spoken on, the advice they've gotten from Pujols. So everything that he's brought to the table has been awesome. Even the defense, like, he's obviously not a great defender by any means, but there hasn't been like a play where it's like, oh crap, like, we had Albert Pujols at first base, and that's why we couldn't make that play. Like, that hasn't really happened. So he's been awesome. He's definitely deserving, of a stock up for me.
Okay, here's my one question. The nickname The Machine, I know that this is a long-term Albert Pujols nickname. I don't know if you remember the Sasha Vujacic YouTube videos from back in the day that went viral.
Of course.
That's my only issue. Like, can we take The Machine? Can that be another nickname in Los Angeles, or do we need to come up with something new here? Because comp shoot in Vujacic, like, I'm kind of there with The Machine with Vujacic.
Yeah, I think if it wasn't someone as
fair,
widely respected and great as Albert Pujols, then I would be with you. But the fact that it's a future Hall of Famer, one of the best to ever do it, he definitely earned that nickname. Like, it's not like that nickname was just handed to him. I'm okay with it, but I definitely got major love for Sasha Vujacic. The 2 free throws he hit in the waning seconds of Game 7 of the 2010 finals just proves why he was the machine.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm okay, calling Albert
Those are all-time legendary YouTube videos. If you don't know what we're talking
that.
about, I don't even. This is like decade and a half ago, maybe 15 years ago.
Yeah.
They're amazing. Look them up. For mine, I'm gonna go stock down, and I'm just gonna kind of go Dodger offense in general. I was looking at the numbers this week. Two players hit over 300 this week on the entire Dodger roster, and only one of them was in the top 8 for plate appearances. So I'll just run through this. This is from most plate appearances to least. Muncy 217, Taylor 200, Lux 100, Pujols 211, Betts 063, Smith 267, Beatty 200, Yoshi 111, Bellinger 0, McKinstry 0, Turner and Barnes, the only two guys over 300. Will Smith did have an on base of 421. Pujols, Muncy, Turner and Barnes all had slugging over 600. So I get batting average is not the most important number anymore. On base percentage is a big deal, et cetera, et cetera. But just was a disappointing performance. I mean, I think the Giant pitching is good. I don't think it's necessarily elite. And so, obviously Houston is good, but same thing. It's not like they face the best pitchers that Houston has to offer. So not an impressive overall performance of just being able to put the ball in play and reach base for the Dodgers this week. Again, there were some exceptions. Turner had a good week. Barnes had a good week. Will Smith, Pujols, Muncy, those guys, like there were numbers that you could look at to say, all right, it wasn't the best week in the world, but it wasn't terrible either. But some of those numbers are disappointing for the Dodgers.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And my next stock up is a guy you just mentioned, Justin Turner. He pretty much carried the Dodgers
Yeah.
offense the first month of the season. But then after that, he went into like maybe the biggest cold stretch we've ever seen from Justin Turner. Like I feel like he's not really a streaky type guy. Like he's mostly just been steady throughout the course of his
Yeah.
career. But he went cold for 2 or 3 weeks there. So it's good to see him coming out of it. Like you said, he's one of two guys to hit over 300 over the last week. He also slugged over 600. He hit a couple homers. So it's good to see Justin Turner coming back out of it. You just mentioned the overall state of the offense, and it's not great. So you need a guy like Justin Turner to maybe kind of carry you again. Luckily, he's got some help right now. Like
Yeah.
Muncy's still doing his thing. Albert's swinging it well. Cody and McKinstry, they just got back. I know that they didn't do anything in the 2 games, but they just got back. It's
Yeah.
fine. So it's good to see Justin Turner coming out of it because he's obviously a huge piece of this team in the middle of that lineup.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and yeah, Turner was the best offensive performer I would say this week. Muncy obviously had some home runs and stuff, but from just a consistency, batting average, on base, slugging percentage, it was good to see that from Turner. My next one is stock up. A couple pieces at the back end of the bullpen who actually had some decent weeks. David Price, not necessarily back end of the bullpen guy, but 2 2/3 in his spot start. 5 strikeouts, no hits, no walks. He'll be expected to get the next bullpen game as well. It sounds like from Dave Roberts. So good to see from him coming back from injury and looking like a guy who belongs in the top 3, top 4 high leverage role. Again, we'll get into some rankings in a little bit. And a couple other guys, I liked what I saw. Edwin Uceda, 3 innings pitched, 5 strikeouts, no earned runs from him. And then Bickford, last 4 appearances, 3 innings pitched, 3 hits, 5 strikeouts, no earned runs. The Dodgers have shown that from a bullpen perspective, they're going to need depth and they're going to need guys that, look, you're not expecting like a sub-3 ERA, but you just want competence. So nice to see a couple guys. Obviously, Price was great, but Bickford and Uceda, who knows? Bickford comes with the pedigree. The stuff looks good. Guys are swinging and missing at some of his stuff. And so who knows? That could be a nice piece that the Dodgers found,
Yeah.
to be kind of the last guy in the bullpen.
Yeah, now I think we've seen with the Dodgers, like they'll identify guys with a pedigree like Bigford, a former first round pick, and they see the stuff he has, and they think, hey, maybe we could unlock
Yeah.
something, maybe we could figure something out to help his command or whatever the case may be. And I know it's a very small sample, but yeah, he's been solid to start. And the bar, let me be
Yeah.
clear, the bar is very
Low.
low for the guys at the back of the final guys in the on the roster in the bullpen. So as long as you could be, average, like we'll take that considering what we've gotten from most of the year.
Yeah.
My final one, it's a stock down. I'm just gonna go with the starting pitching. The Dodgers starters. They're 4 guys. They've been great all year. Let me just be clear there. But I'd say that this past week was maybe their worst of the season.
Yeah.
We saw Bauer. He struggled a little bit in Houston. He had like the 35 pitch first inning. Credit to him. He still got through 6. But that was a game the Dodgers lost, and then they come back 4 games against the Giants. You have a bullpen game and then your 3 other studs going. You think if you're going to lose any of those, it's the
Yeah.
bullpen game. turns out that was the only game they won all weekend, and a big part of that was the starting pitching. I mean, Buehler was fine. We had our Buehler discussion. I don't need to get into that. He only gave up 1 earned run in 6 innings, so he was fine. But they lost that game, and then just bad outings, I'd say, for Julio and Kershaw. Nothing to be overly concerned about, but ideally against the Giants, that's a team you want to beat, and just neither of them didn't. They both didn't have it.
Yeah.
And it was pretty clear from the beginning of both outings. So yeah, just stock down, starting pitching, still confident in them moving forward, but not the best week for those guys.
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked about it. I think the starting pitching has covered a lot of issues that you see in other places. The reason that the bullpen is flaring up as an issue now is because all of a sudden starting pitching isn't completely invincible as it has been. So again,
Right.
every once in a while you're going to have these starts. Not great from Kershaw, not great from Urias. Bauer, not his best either. But again, like you said, we're not worried about it just from the perspective of who's had a good week and who's had a bad week. That's a group that hasn't had the best week. I'm going to go a little bit outside the box, go to the minor league levels here for my last stock up. A few names to throw at you. Diego Cartaya, walk-off grand slam the other night. It was a bomb. Obviously, the video quality at the high A or the single A level is not the best, but this is a 19-year-old playing in Rancho. Again, that's A-ball. He has an OPS in 4 games, okay? Small sample size, 4 games. OPS of 1.356. Did I mention he's a 19-year-old catcher? This is a guy that if you are not tracking what he is doing, there are people that think he is the next big deal in the Dodgers sort of pipeline of hitting prospects coming up. I know they've got Kever Ruiz. I know they've got Will Smith. I don't know how they're going to make all these pieces fit. But Diego Cartaya is a guy that some people think has a ceiling that is higher than both Smith and Ruiz. So keep that in mind. The other shout out real quick, Luke Raley and Steven Souza Jr. Oklahoma City scored 20 runs last night. Both Raley and Souza had 3 home runs apiece. 3 home runs apiece. You joked, where was that when Luke Raley was up on the major league level? I think things are a little different down in AAA, but I got to give a shout out to Cartaya, Raley, and Souza because that's an impressive stretch.
Yeah, and let's be clear. I think the PCL, the AAA league, I don't even know if it's called that anymore, but it's very hitter friendly. All the ballparks, all the geographically where they are, it's very hitter friendly. So that plays a role. But anytime you're hitting 3 homers in a game, like that's impressive, no matter how hitter friendly it is. So yeah, props to Raley and Steven Souza Jr. That's a guy he has a major league pedigree. Like he's had some good seasons before. So I'll be curious to see if this keeps up, when we see him at the big league level. They'd have to clear a 40-man roster space for him, so there would have to be some maneuvering. But I'm sure we'll probably see him at some point, especially if he keeps this up.
Yeah.
And then Diego Cartaya, like you said, he's the guy with the highest ceiling out of everyone, maybe in the Dodgers farm system. So it's great to see him raking, and he absolutely pimped that homer too. That was fun. But yeah, I think a lot of people. A lot of people are saying Cartaya is the reason why maybe Keibert Ruiz might be expendable. We got the deadline coming up in a couple months here. If the Dodgers want to make some moves, they're going to have to trade someone, and maybe Keibert Ruiz is that guy because you got Will Smith, who's we all know and love. He's great. He's at the big league level now. He's under club control for 3 or 4 more seasons. He's not going anywhere. And then you got Cartaya coming up, who's 19 and looking like the next big thing. Like, where does that leave Keibert Ruiz, who, let me be clear, he's also been good as well. We're not trying to hate on Keibert Ruiz, but there has to be some sort of odd man out here, and it could be him. So that's just a good trade piece to have for the Dodgers. And yeah, Cartaya has absolutely been mashing, so that's great to see.
Couple more stuck up. I got to give a shout out. Daniel's wall, stuck up on Daniel's wall. We got a second pennant up there in the Lakers pennant, so a little more variety going on back there. And then
I've been doing some Lakers videos, so I figured I should get that up as well to support both teams.
We got to get some color. We got to get some color going on. You get black and yellow, so it's better than nothing. It's better than nothing. I got to give a shout out to my buddy Scott. Scott's a friend of mine. He's also a big fan of the show. He, on his own volition, printed some a DodgerHeads t-shirt.
Wow.
So, shout out to Scott. Stock up for Scott. Stock up for DodgerHeads. He tried sending me one with my face and with your face on it, Daniel. And I wanted
Oh
nothing to
God.
do with wearing a shirt that had my face on it. So I got this one, and there's one other one, the bobblehead graphic that we use as the intro. He printed that on a gray shirt as well. So shout out to
Nice.
Scott. It's not for sale. It's just this is him doing his own thing, just to be clear. But there you
Hey,
go.
if people are interested, maybe we could
Yeah.
come up with something.
Yeah, there you
Let
go.
us know in the comment.
Send me a message on Twitter if you're interested in shirts. I'll connect you to Scott and we'll figure something out there. All right, well, let's shift into an exercise that I'm actually fairly excited about, mostly because I think this is the type of thing that many fans are doing on smaller levels. I was engaged in multiple conversations this past week that involved the question, who do you trust more offensively, Austin Barnes or Albert Pujols? Now, this was before Pujols in the series against the Giants where he had, like you said, 2 home runs, an RBI double, and what should have been a 3rd home run. So I think that debate has probably been settled for a large degree of people. But it kind of gets at the question of who do you trust more? And especially in the bullpen, people complaining, why is this guy getting put in the game? Yada, yada, yada. Who do you trust more? And ranking these. So I figured it would be fun here in this last maybe 10, 15 minutes of the show to kind of talk through some of this. So we'll go through each group individually. And we'll start with starting pitchers. And Daniel, I'll let you take the first crack at this one. These are alphabetically organized to start. Bauer, Buehler, Kershaw, Urias. Right now, everybody's fully healthy, and that's the premise of this whole exercise, okay? We're talking right now. We're not talking about like who's a better player for their entire career, who do you expect to be better at the end of the season. We're saying as things stand right now, whether injured, not injured, coming off of injury, etc., etc. Who do you trust right now the most out of this group of 4 starting pitchers? How would you rank Bauer, Buehler, Kershaw, and Urias?
Yeah, I think I would rank it exactly how it is right there. I guess that's just a coincidence that's their alphabetical order, but I think I'd go Bauer one. And I honestly think Bauer can be better. Like
Yeah.
he's struggled with his pitch count in a lot of his outings, which has prevented him from going 7-8 innings a lot of the time. But if you look at the run prevention, he's been elite. If you look at the strikeout rate, he's
Yeah.
been elite. And I just feel comfortable when he takes the mound. Like he's just always composed up there, and it's honestly enjoyable too, like the way he celebrates. He's having fun. So I'm going Bauer one. Buehler, we talked about a lot. As bad as the underlying numbers are, he's got a 2.66 ERA. He's been able to prevent runs. And then the last 2 guys, I mean, I might have flipped them, maybe a week ago, but Julio just had his worst outing of the year. So I'm, and just Kershaw's overall body of work, I still think I trust him a little more than Julio. But all 4 of these guys, they're all great options. Like any team,
Yeah.
any team would be happy to have any of these guys, and hopefully we'll be able to add a 5th guy to this list within a week or so here, because having 4 starting pitchers is never an ideal thing, and I think we've seen kind of the repercussions of it with the bullpen getting a little taxed.
Yeah, and along those lines, Tony Gonsolin expected to make one more rehab start and then be back. So expect, maybe you get one more bullpen game out of the Dodgers. I believe it's tomorrow, Tuesdays, when that game is scheduled. And then we'll see how the rotation shakes out. But Gonsolin expected to make one more rehab start, I believe, maybe Friday towards the end of this week. And so the middle end of next week, you might have Gonsolin in. And Gonsolin's really good. We won't get into that. I'm with you. I nothing much to argue. I would put Kershaw second, personally. I know he wasn't great yesterday, but body of work, underlying metrics, etc. I put a little weight in there. So I would say Bauer has been clearly the Dodgers' best pitcher. Not to say there's a huge gap, but I would put Bauer 1, Kershaw 2, Buehler 3, and Urias 4. I would say that second group of 4 is fairly tight. I mean, I think Urias has had days where it felt like maybe he was higher than 4, and then days like the other day where it's like, well, maybe he's a distant 4th. But I think of the groups, this is probably the easiest to navigate. So let's get into the bullpen here. And here are the Dodger relief pitchers currently on the active roster: Bickford, Gonzalez, Jansen, Jones, Kelly, Price, Trinan, Uceta, Vesia, and White. So again, when you want to criticize the Dodger bullpen, keep in mind who they have out there. There's a bunch of guys not on this list, right? Nelson is not healthy. Gratterall is not healthy. Alexander is not healthy. Knebel, if you want to be very optimistic and hope that he comes back this season, is not healthy. So when people are complaining about who gets brought in, I'm curious how people rank these. So let me give you, I think we kind of agree on some categories here. So I'll start with my top of the list. I've got Jansen as the guy I trust most. I've got Trinan second, Gonzalez third, Price fourth. Those are the 4 guys that I would say are in the high leverage category. I'm not saying you agree with my order, but I think you agree that those 4 are the guys that you trust the most. Is that fair to say? And how do you feel about Jansen, Trinan, Gonzalez, Price as the order?
Yeah. I was about to say, I feel like with the bullpen. It's kind of more in tiers than like, single rankings or
Yeah.
whatever. So I'm with you that those top four, that's the clear top four when you look at this list. The only difference for me is I'd probably switch Trinan and Jansen. I'd put Trinan first. But it's really close. Both of those guys have been really good. They had one hiccup,
Yeah.
on I think it was Friday night, but that was pitching back-to-back days. They had pitched a lot over the course of that week. So you're okay if you have one hiccup, every few weeks if you're otherwise money. So I think that top four is pretty clear, and honestly, they're all pretty interchangeable because they've all been really good.
Yeah, and I think if you want to get at the sense of what the Dodger bullpen is missing the most, right now there is no middle tier. Like you have high leverage guys and you have low leverage
Yeah.
guys. And Jimmy Nelson and Gratterall are the two guys that I would assume probably belong in the middle leverage area, and neither of them is healthy right now. And then even Alexander is probably the low level guy you trust the most, and he's not healthy right now. So 3 of your top 7 pitchers are not available at the moment, which is problematic. And even Price has, he's having to be a starter in a bullpen game, and he's coming
Right.
off injury. So you're
Yeah.
even not really getting to maximize there. Now, I'm curious the rest of these guys. So we've got Bickford, Jones, Kelly, Uceta, Vesia, and White. I mean, you could go so many different directions. I'll throw mine at you. I trust. It's so funny to even look at this list. I think I trust Bickford more than any of the rest of those guys. I've got
Wow.
Bickford 1. I've got Kelly 2. I've got. Oh man. I think I've got Bickford, Kelly, White, Jones, Uceta, Vesia. That's how I would do it. Bickford, Kelly, White, Jones, Vesia, and Uceta and Vesia. Uceta bumps up the list a little bit. Had a nice week. Vesia's last. White has had a decent week. He throws strikes. He kind of tends to put guys on and give up a lot of unearned runs. But Bickford, Kelly, White, Jones, Uceta, Vesia. That's what I'm going with.
Yeah, I mean, mine's pretty similar. I think the bottom three is pretty clear. Like White, Uceta, Vesia, and in whatever order.
Okay.
I'd go in the exact order I just said.
Yeah, I agree.
Vesia's last. So then the other three guys, I guess, would be considered the middle guys, although like they really should be in that
Yeah.
bottom tier, like you were saying. But I guess for those three guys, I'll probably order them. Would you have Bickford, Kelly,
Yeah.
Jones? Uh, I'm gonna put Kelly at the top of that list.
Whoa. I was going to say, are you going to move Kelly down to the bottom of that list?
No, I'm gonna put Kelly at the top of that list, and then I'm gonna go Bickford, then Jones. I don't have a good reason for for any of this. I mean, all these guys are at the bottom of the
Yeah.
list in reality. But I'll go Joe Kelly just because of the track record. I still think it's a pretty small sample size with him. He started the year injured. It was a shoulder issue, so it's going to take time for him to get back to full strength. I still think, I know the exercise is for right now, but I'm still kind of projecting for the future at least a little bit. But overall, I think the key here is that these options are not great options, and let's just hope some of these other guys could get back soon. Because, like you said, if you put in, Gratterall, Nelson, and Alexander,
Yeah.
and then you take off 3 of these guys, and then the other middle guys are pushed to the bottom, then that's a pretty good looking
Yeah.
bullpen. But the way it looks now is not exactly ideal.
Yeah, Justin Lorber was tweeting about this, and I kind of sort of summarized my thoughts on it. At full strength, again, assuming Knebel is not healthy this year, you've got Jansen, Trinan, Gonzalez, and Price as 4 high leverage guys. You've got Jimmy Nelson and Brusdar Gratterall as medium leverage guys. And then you've got Scott Alexander, and then probably pick 2 out of Kelly, Jones, and Bickford as the back end of your bullpen. And that's pretty
Right.
good. I mean, we're going from is Bickford the 5th best reliever in the bullpen to him being the 9th best reliever. And keep in mind, the Dodgers have an extra reliever right now because of the bullpen setup as well. So not
Right.
only do they have 10 guys, but they don't even really have enough guys to fill out that bullpen. So again, if you go Jansen, Trinan, Gonzalez, Price, Nelson, Gratterall, Alexander, that's a great top 7. And then you're not so concerned about Nate Jones or Joe Kelly or Phil Bickford as your bottom end of the bullpen. All right, same exercise. Let's go to offense here. Again, this is sort of categorized by position a little bit, but we've got Barnes, Smith, Lux, Muncy, Pujols, Turner, Beatty, Bellinger, Betts, McKinstry, Taylor, and Satsugo. Again, exercises right now. I think we both agree number 1 on this list is Max Muncy. Is that fair to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I think I would actually say, and again, this is the exercises right now. I want to emphasize this 100 different times. I think number 2, 3, and 4 for me are pretty clear. And I have them in this order. And again, looking at the last week, maybe I switch this up a little bit, but I've got Chris Taylor, Justin Turner, and Will Smith as my 2, 3, and 4 today. Are those the three guys that you have 2, 3, and 4? And how do you feel about the order?
Those are, and the only change in the order I had was I had Turner second and Taylor third.
Yeah, and as soon as I said it out loud, I was like, Turner's been better the last week. This is something I put together a couple days ago. So, yeah, that's where I would have it. Then you get to the fascinating tier. I think, again, I bet we agree on these next three. I could be wrong. But I've got Betts, Bellinger, and Lux as my next three in that particular order. Do you have those three? And if so, what do you think of that order?
I had the same exact order.
Okay.
It's never ideal when you have two MVPs that are like fifth and sixth, the most trust guys you have right now. I guess
maybe it is perfectly ideal.
It's a credit to guys, being that are at the top for how great they've been. But ideally, you want those guys to be better, and they haven't been. And with Bellinger, it's totally because of the injury. Like he's only had 2 games since he got back, so I'm not putting any sort of merit into those. But we just got to see it, and I have no doubt that Cody will be fine. But yeah, that I had the same order as you for those guys.
Okay, then we get to sort of the everybody's healthy, these guys are on the bench kind of group. Pujols, Beatty, McKinstry, Barnes, and Yoshi. That would be the group of 5. I've got Pujols as a pretty clear top of that list as of today, followed by, I'm gonna put McKinstry second, Beatty third, because Beatty has struggled the last week. I had him higher, but I'll go Pujols, McKinstry, Beatty, Barnes, and then Yoshi as my 5 at the bottom.
Okay, I had it pretty similar. I had McKinstry first on that list. I still think similar to Bellinger, like I'm not putting any merit into a 2-game sample, and we saw what he was capable of early in the year. And I know this is just about bats, but also like the defense has to factor in at least a little bit since there's no DH. These guys are all playing positions. So I got McKinstry first, and then Pujols, and then Beatty. And then who are the last two? Barnes and Tsutsugo, the interchangeable at the bottom there. I guess Barnes hit the big home runs to tie it up the other night. So I think I'll give him the edge there over Tsutsugo. I feel like it would be wrong putting him last. Tsutsugo, he hasn't done a whole lot. I'll be curious to see when guys get healthy what his future looks like, because I mean maybe he'll get going offensively, but when this team has everyone healthy. When Seager gets back, when Pollock gets back, if you look at this list and who you're taking off, I think he's the first one there.
Yeah, and again, once they get a 5th starter, I think the expectation is they would be able to add another bat to the bench. So, for example, AJ Pollock and Jimmy Nelson coming back does not necessarily mean Pollock has to take Tsutsugo's spot on the roster.
Right. Right.
But that also is likely to happen a week before Gonsolin comes back. So how they navigate that little stretch, that's part of the reason I wonder maybe you put Mookie Betts on the injured list for 10 days just to kind of buy yourself some time before you have to make some of those decisions. And what that means for Yoshi, I think, is interesting because, if you were expecting a quick turnaround, you have not seen it. And I think he hit, like I said, he hit about 100 this past week. He made a great play in left field, but I don't think you're looking at him as like a defensive replacement out there either.
Yeah.
And so it'll be interesting. I mean, I'm sure the Dodgers would love if they could get a chance to sort of option him and develop him a little bit. But again, I mean, obviously the Rays tried to do that and he wasn't going to pass through waivers. The Dodgers traded for him because they were afraid of it. So are there other teams out there that see what's happening at the Dodgers and say, man, we can't really waste a 26 man roster spot on this guy right now? Or do they see what the Dodgers and Rays see and say, hey, we kind of like the upside and we'll take our chances there as well. Who knows? We'll see how that plays out. But yeah, so there you go. When next time you're having a debate with your friends about who you want to pinch hit in a particular spot, I think we can all agree we don't want offensive players pinch hitting for position players. Maybe keep the pinch hitting to pitchers so that we don't keep running out of offensive players in extra inning games as we did again this last week. Obviously, it didn't come back to hurt them, thankfully. But so there you go. Well, let's move on. We got a minute left. Let's just talk briefly the Dodgers' upcoming schedule. 3 home games against the Cardinals. The Cardinals have won 4 of their last 5. They're in first place in the NL Central, 30-23 on the season. So they're the 4th best record in the National League, just behind the Dodgers. Then they've got an off day. They've got 3 in Atlanta, who have won 5 of their last 8, plus 2 postponed games against the Mets. They're second in the NL East, 2 games under 500. The Mets, by the way, I read a stat that they've played like 11 less games than everybody else because they've had all these postponements, which is hilarious. But
Yeah.
let's start with the Cardinals. Unbelievable matchup tonight. Flaherty versus Bauer. I mean, this is they're 2 of the best pitchers in all of baseball. Probably a bullpen game versus Gant tomorrow, and then Buehler versus Carlos Martinez on Wednesday. Cardinals are a really good team. This is at home. It's a good opportunity for the Dodgers to bounce back, but it's not going to be easy.
Yeah, like you said, the Cardinals, they've been playing well. They've won 4 out of 5, and they've been doing it. I mean, they got great pitching. You talk about Flaherty, I feel like his reputation speaks for itself. And I feel like he's pitched well against the Dodgers in the past, so that'll be a challenge tonight. I'm expecting a low-scoring game. And it's kind of similar to the Giants. Like, they don't necessarily have big name guys as far as their pitching goes, but they've got guys that have been getting it done.
Yeah.
Gant's been solid. Carlos Martinez, I think he took like a no-no into the 6th or 7th inning of his last start. He's been throwing it well. So yeah, it'll be another tough series. Should be some closely contested games. Obviously, we know the Cardinals got Arenado, so that was a big addition to the middle of their lineup, which it's otherwise like it's not a great lineup by any means.
Yeah.
Like, but yeah, it should be a good series. And then the Braves feel like they're kind of one of the most surprising teams in baseball, like as far as disappointment goes. Obviously, we know they played the Dodgers in the NLCS last year. They were 1 win away from getting to the World Series, and they've taken a huge step back this year. They've had a lot of injuries. I will give them that. Their pitching staff hasn't performed how they've wanted it to. And we know the Marcelo Zuna situation that's going on right now. Who knows?
Awful.
He probably won't be playing for them again, hopefully at least.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Braves probably will be coming in with a chip on their shoulder after blowing a 3-1 lead to the Dodgers. They're going to have a little extra motivation to beat them. But I'll just say that it's not the same Braves team that the Dodgers saw a year ago. So, hopefully the Dodgers could win a couple series this week to get back on track. But they're facing some, on paper at least, some difficult opponents.
Yeah, and we talked about a couple of weeks ago, the Dodgers were heading into this stretch with a bunch of games against the Giants and then the Cardinals and the Braves with the Astros mixed in the middle. So we knew that it was going to be a tough stretch after that 4-game set in Arizona. And it's kind of gone like sort of, there was a stretch where like, hey, Dodgers weren't fully healthy. They were coming off a really rough stretch. They do well in Arizona. They sweep the Giants. Everything's looking good. Then the Houston series split. They lose 3 out of 4 to the Giants. And so it's kind of like, what are you going to do in this stretch? Now you've got 3 at home against the Cardinals, as you said. A lot of old NL West faces floating around. Martinez, as you pointed out, he's made 2 starts since coming off the injured list, has been great. I only know that because he's on my fantasy team, but he's been really good the last 2. And then, Atlanta, it's going to be personal for those guys. You know that they're going to be extra motivated to want to beat the Dodgers, especially in Atlanta. So that'll be an interesting one. That's, it's sort of the cliche is throw out the records, but they're 2 games under 500, but when the Dodgers come to town, you better believe they're going to be fired up for that. So, we keep saying it, 4 out of 6 would be a great week for the Dodgers, especially all things considered.
Yeah.
Who knows if they can pull that off. Nice to have an off day in there as well. We don't know matchups for the Braves. I imagine the Dodgers will be able to put 3 legit starters out there, in Kershaw, Urias, and possibly Bauer. Over the weekend. So we'll see what they do there. But should be a fun week of baseball for the Dodgers. The Atlanta series is nice. You get some earlier games when you're playing on the West Coast. So if you like that kind of thing, although if you have a 9 to 5, maybe you hate that kind of thing because Dodger games are starting while you're still at work. So, but that'll do it for us. Good show today. So we appreciate you as always joining. We are still working on, the hope is to get this put in podcast format. So if you listen to podcasts on Apple or Spotify or Audible, any of those places, the hope is to have that set up in the next week or 2. So stay tuned for details about that. I promised a Fabian Ardaya interview last week. We recorded it from his hotel room in Houston, and the Wi-Fi was so terrible that it was completely unusable. So again, I'm promising again, we're supposed to record tomorrow. So hopefully for that. And then Rob and I will be back with a weekend preview this weekend, and Daniel and I as well with a live post-game show pending Lakers schedule. We're going to avoid all Laker talk right now because it's not optimistic, positive talk in some circles. So with all that said, we appreciate you joining us. As always, DodgerBlue.com, DodgerBlue1958, everywhere on social media. We appreciate the watch. Make sure to subscribe Click the notification bell as well. We appreciate you. Enjoy the rest of your week. Go Dodgers.
The best team holding a trophy high in the air. The Los Angeles Dodgers, champions of the baseball world.